Going through the process of actually getting on a psychology doctorate can be tough. It can be a long process. There's numerous stages of application to get through. There's that paper application. There's all kinds of different things that you've got to get through. But eventually, if you get through those stages, you're going to have an interview for your psychology doctorate. But what exactly do you need to know in anticipation for that interview? What kind of tips do you need to know? What kind of tricks do you need to know? What kind of things do you need to avoid in actually going into that interview to ensure that it's successful? Well, on this week's episode of GetPsyched, we're going to be taking a look at what you need to know for your psychology doctorate interview. There's a video for psychology students out there today. So make sure to stay tuned towards the end of the video as well, because I'm going to give you the key tips on what not to do in your interview as well. So, first question is, what exactly is your psychology doctorate interview actually for? Well, fundamentally, it's to get you on that doctorate in the first place. You'll have gone through that paper application, you'll have gone through perhaps a couple of other meetings, maybe even a call back. I know that was the case with me. And then you'll get that interview and you'll go through that interview process. Fundamentally, the objective of that interview is to assess how applicable you are for the doctorate, how much you're going to be able to fit within the remit of that course, how much your experience and qualifications have got you to the point where you can actually undertake the doctorate, if you kind of deserve to be there. That's fundamentally what the interview is all about. Okay, next big question. What do you need to expect, or what should you expect when it comes to getting onto that psychology doctorate interview? Well, it's often going to be a panel, so there may be like kind of 2, 3, or 4 people interviewing you on an individual basis. So it would be just you, but a kind of panel of individuals. And there's going to be a number of different types of questions. Now, I'm going to feed into this in a little minute, but we're going to talk very briefly about something that you kind of need to avoid a wee bit in your interview. One of the things that you need to recognize is that your experience and your qualifications have already got you to the point of this interview. So, experience, qualifications, all those things are really important and relevant when it comes to your paper application. You need to be talking about perhaps an assistant psychology position that you got, a research assistant position that you've got, maybe even like healthcare support worker, something like that. You're going into kind of detail about what you learned on those positions, what kind of experience you gained, why they were important for you. And don't get me wrong, you will go into those in your interview as well. Likewise, you'll be talking a little bit about the qualifications you've got, if you did a psychology graduate diploma or an undergrad, what you learned on that. But fundamentally, all of those things have already been covered. You've achieved to the point where your experience and your qualifications are good enough to get you to that interview process. Now you need to get your personality across. You need to get across who you are. And that's one of the key features of a good psychology doctorate interview. People on this doctorate, or people on a panel, want to know if you can be taught, if you're teachable. It makes me think, I remember when I was going to sit in this interview, it makes me think a little bit about a basketball coach that I used to have who said that he wanted players not who are experts in basketball, not who are fantastically talented. He wanted players who were coachable. Now that word coachable meant that they could be molded, that they could be improved, that they could be taught. That's fundamentally what people are trying to get out of the people that they're interviewing in those interview panels. They want to know if you can be taught. Like, will you be a good fit for the course? Will you be a good fit within your peers as well? Do you have the personality and the attributes that actually qualify you to get onto this doctorate in the first place? Do you have what it takes as an individual? But like I said earlier, it's also important that you're talking about your experience. So, like I said, those AP jobs, those research assistant jobs, it's important that you talk about the things that you've done, but it's also vital that you talk about what you learned off the back of them. It's not enough to just say that, an assistant psychology position is really hard to get and I got one. You need to talk a little bit about what you learned. One of the key things on any psychology doctorate is that it has that academic side and it also has that reflective individual side. You need to talk a little bit about the things that you've learned. Be reflective. Be reflective of your practice, of the things that you maybe did wrong, of the things that you did well, and how that's informing you to progress your career in psychology. Because ultimately, your psychology doctorate is the pinnacle of your psychology profession. That's the elite. That's as high as you're going to get. So what have you learned previously that's informing you and equipping you onto that psychology doctorate? There's also something to be considering here about questions that you might be asked about your philosophical beliefs. So this might be to do with, how you actually view the world as a whole, how you view people. Remember, we're talking about psychology here. It's a psychology doctorate, so people are going to be really important. How you view people is going to be really important. Thinking a little bit about philosophical underpinnings. By no means do you have to have this set in stone. I'm just about to go into my final year of my doctorate, and that's one of the key features that I need to have a very, very clear-cut overview of what my philosophical beliefs are. You don't have to have that when you're going straight into the interview. but you need to show that you've shown a little bit of an understanding of what your belief system as a whole is. What do you think of people? What do you think of society? What do you think of that profession of psychology? It could be clinical, it could be counselling, it could be occupational, sports and exercise. What's your philosophical beliefs about that entity of psychology, and how can you communicate that to the interview panel? One of the other key questions that I got asked, and I think probably most people might get asked, is the question of why you and why now. So we've kind of covered a little bit about why you, and that's about your personality, more than just your experience and your qualifications, of course. You want to get that across. But one of the key questions is kind of why do this doctorate now? Why not do it 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Why not do it 10 years from now? What is it about this moment that requires you or makes you feel that you're able and equipped to get onto this doctorate? Remember, you're being interviewed by psychologists. So one of the key things with psychologists is they don't just look at the surface. They don't just see you turn up to the interview and think, oh, you're ready to come onto the interview, that's great, let's ask you a bunch of questions. They're going to dig deeper. They're going to ask those deeper questions, those deeper rooted questions, the kind of layers of the onion, so to speak. And they're going to say to you, what is it about this moment that's driving you to this doctorate? And you've got to be equipped for that. Think a little bit about what is it about this moment right now? What is it about this year that's driven me to take on this doctorate now? Something else to be considerate of is, why have you not applied for another form of psychology? I went on to the counselling psychology doctorate, why did I not go on for the clinical? Why did I not go for sports and exercise? What was that about me that drew me to counselling psychology? Again, that talks a little bit about you as an individual and your personality, but really engaging with the form of psychology that you're applying for and the interview is for is going to be really, really helpful. So, that's going to talk a little bit about why you, why now. But thinking again about what it is about this realm of psychology that applies to you and actually attracts you. Okay, so we've taken a look at what your psychology doctorate interview is all about, some of the things that you might be asked, those questions that you might be asked. As I said at the start of the video, let's take a look at some of the key points to avoid in your psychology doctorate, the things that you don't want to be doing. Well, definitely you do not want to be focusing on your qualifications. If you've got a distinction or a merit in your psychology undergraduate, then that's great, but they already know that. And that's not something that you should put a flag in. That's not a cornerstone to your interview here. Yes, okay, it might come up, and yes, you can talk maybe about the rigorous studying that you did and the things that you learned, but it's only going to get you so far. A lot of people sometimes think that because they got a distinction or a merit, then they're guaranteed for that psychology doctorate, and it's absolutely not the case. I've seen it happen before. If you're not able to get your personality across, then you're going to really, really struggle. So one of the key issues that people have when they go into that psychology interview, and one of the things that is the biggest deterrent, is people that focus too much on their qualifications. Another thing that's difficult, and one of the things to avoid, is people who don't talk enough about themselves as an individual. I know I've talked to you a lot about personality and the importance of getting that across, but that is absolutely vital. If you're not able to communicate who you are as a person, then you're going to be in trouble. So that means, stretching out of that academic field. That means stretching out of that experience field and actually talking about who you are individually. Another key issue is not having a bit of a background understanding of the topic that you're actually applying for. So if you're going for that counselling psychology doctorate and you don't have a vague background of what counselling psychology is all about, then you're going to struggle, because you will get asked that. They will ask you, what does clinical psychology mean to you? Or what does counselling psychology mean to you? And if you don't have a good enough answer, it's not to say that it would be right or wrong, but one that's subjective and one that you understand, then you're going to struggle. So one of the biggest issues is people that don't go in fully prepared with an understanding of the topic that they're actually applying for. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching this week's episode of GetPsyched. This week we've been taking a look at everything you need to know for your psychology doctorate interview, and we've looked at some key tips at the end there, things that you need to avoid and the biggest mistakes made. This week we've been doing that video for psychology students, psychology graduates, but every week we do different kinds of videos for the general public and students as well. Guys, if you've enjoyed today's video, then make sure to hit that like button. You can share the video and comment as well. And if you've been enjoying GetPsyched as a whole, then make sure to subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll catch you next week.